Okay, so welcome to our MYMOON Power Musings. Today we're joined with Natalie K Martin. Hello, Natalie.
Hi Chloe, hi everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us. Natalie is a menstrual cycle awareness coach and also a pleasure coach as well. And Natalie, you were trained at the Red School, weren't you?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, me too. I love,
yeah.
love the Red School work. It was so powerful. And so I've been asking everyone because I find it really, really fascinating to see how everybody's got into this work. Like, what was your draw? What was your pull into menstrual cycle awareness work and also like feminine empowerment and feminine work?
Yeah. Well, the feminine empowerment work I think has always been there. When I look back on life, that was very much to do with writing novels. It was all to do with the empowerment of women. So that's always been there. And then I would say menstrual cycle awareness and menstruality work came in when I came off the pill, 2016, I think that was. And I'd been on the pill for 17 years, so a very long time. And I didn't know anything about the menstrual cycle at all. Like, really, we must have learned about it at school, but I didn't remember. So it really started with, okay, I'm coming off the pill, what do I do? And then learning about the menstrual cycle, the nuts and bolts of it, what actually happens, all of that on a biological perspective. And then I guess just seeing and reading, and especially on social media, lots of things about bleeding with the new moon and ovulating with the full moon, and feeling really good while ovulating and not tending to feel very good while bleeding. And both of those were not my reality. I was like the opposite. And I was kind of like, what's wrong with me? And just started to kind of try to figure out what was quote unquote wrong with me, and then learned about menstrual cycle awareness, menstruality. And then I got my big learning through Cycle Coach School with Claire Baker during lockdown, beginning of lockdown. And then, and then afterwards with the Menstruality Leadership Program with Red School. And yeah, it's been there ever since. It's a short answer.
I love it. I remember the time when I came off the pill though as well. It was like something in my body just knew I did not want to be taking this anymore. And I had no menstrual cycle awareness at the time either. Like it just wasn't something that I knew about really. I was just taking the pill and like having a period when I stopped taking the pill. But there just came this point where I was like, I really know that I shouldn't be taking this. And I had a boyfriend at the time, and he was really worried about me getting pregnant. And so then I had the coil put in. And my body was in agony. It was awful. I was in so much pain, and it didn't. And then the relationship didn't last for very long after that. And I remember really wanting to have that taken out again. And again, no, having like no awareness, like is in educational awareness, but it was more like just that my body knew it didn't want it, either of them. Is that how you felt when you realized you had to come off the pill?
Yeah, it was a long combination of things. So it was, I think I had taken like a 6-month pause with the pill, which also coincided with the end of a relationship. But everything was fine with the pill, apart from the fact that I had migraines, at least one migraine a week, to the point where I would call in sick and, just dose myself up on like double paracetamol, double ibuprofen and things like that. And I mentioned it to my new doctor, and he had said, you've got a history of childhood migraines. This pill isn't maybe the best for you. Why don't you stop it and see what happens? And I stopped it, and the migraines went. And I had about a 6-month pause, and then went back on to the mini pill instead. And I just had always kind of felt a little bit like my life was just really stuck, or not boring, but like there just wasn't these waves. And I would look at other people who seemed to be like super vibrant and just very alive, and I'd always wondered, is that something to do with my pill? Same with libido. Like, do I not feel this kind of spontaneous sexuality because of the pill? And around that time as well, I was starting to teach yoga and really just getting into what we call wellness now, I guess, and questioning like what's going into my body. And so those were the kind of things that led me to it. And then actually what sealed the deal, I was researching menstrual cups and looking on YouTube for, you know, some recommendation videos, and found someone who was talking about menstrual cups, but also in that video she mentioned that she'd stopped taking the pill, and these are all the things that the pill can do, and one of them is gum problems. And I'd suffered with like bleeding gums for years. Although my teeth were really healthy, I just had bleeding gums all the time. And that was kind of like this is really weird. Like, why is my pill making my gums bleed? And that was the thing that really then spurred me on to say, okay, I'm really going to research what happens. And then I decided to come off the pill. So, yeah.
Wow, so interesting, isn't it? Like, we're actually tracking what's happening with our bodies, and not just taking something and just taking it and just not having any questions, you know, which is what I did. I didn't have any questions at all. But yeah, and it's so fascinating. It's like at that whole period of time while I was taking the pill, like now that you said it, I do remember this kind of flatness, but for me it was almost like this sort of depression that was kind of following me around the whole time. And then when I like started on my spiritual path, like I really felt like that I had so many breakthroughs, but maybe it was also because I'd stopped taking the pill as well, to be honest. I mean, yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it?
Yeah, it's, you know, it's just one of those things I would Google and then come across a forum or come across a blog post and then read comments, and people would say things and I would feel like that's also kind of like how I feel as well. And as you say, it was, I never felt depressed, but I just also never felt elevated.
Yeah.
Kind of, you know, even though some great things were happening in my life at the time, I like, you know, I got my first proper book deal and all these kinds of things where, and it was, you know, of course I felt happiness, and it's not that I was miserable all the time, but there was just always a kind of a feeling of heaviness around. And yeah, and so, and it's the same with me as well. So much of the menstrual cycle awareness journey is tied up in my spiritual and self-development journey as well. So it is quite hard to look and see and try to separate what's hormonal, what's spiritual, etc. And I think, to be honest, it's all just wrapped up in one. I think that our hormones and our menstrual cycle affect who we are as people, and who we are as people affect our cycle and everything. So I think it's probably like all combined.
Yeah, I think so too. And I feel like that the menstrual cycle is like the biggest spiritual gift that we have. And once I really learned that I was like going through my own, you know, death and rebirth process every month, like I was like, wow, okay, actually I don't need to be looking so much outside of myself and trying to create like my spiritual connection through you know, I was into so many different things. Like I was into like all of this, like oh god, like I used to go to city yoga all the time. Like used to really be into like having a guru and stuff like that. Now I don't at all. I just don't feel like that doesn't feel true to me. It's like it feels like what feels really true is actually deeply connecting to my internal cycles and like allowing that to be my spiritual guidance.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I believe, and one of the things that I teach is that we have menstrual cycle awareness and then we have menstruality. And for me, they're two slightly different things. And for me, the spiritual self-development aspect, the spiritual practice of being a cyclical person is what menstruality is. And menstrual cycle awareness is that I have a menstrual cycle, this is how it affects me. Maybe doing like, you know, syncing your cycle to like how you work, how you eat, how you sleep, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I have the same kind of feeling.
I love that though. I never really thought about them separated like that before. That's really helpful actually. So you can, so it's almost like the practical and like the energetic.
Yeah, because there's some people who will never want the menstruality side of things, or who feel like they don't need it, and then there'll be other people who, you know, are really looking for that spiritual connection. So yeah, for me that it's all one, but they're different.
Yes. And then so in your time of teaching and like all of the I guess transformations that you've seen through women that you've worked with, like what is it that like drives you the most to do this work? What is it like in your bones that you're just like, I have to share this, like I know it to be so transformative?
Do you know, it's really funny because this is something I've been focusing a lot on these probably the last 3 to 4 weeks. This is a question that's been going round and round, like, what is my why? Why do I do this? Why do I share this? And I think what I'm boiling it down to is that for me, I just believe that like we can actually change our lives and our realities through the things that we do. Doesn't mean it's always easy. It doesn't happen overnight. But for me, I really honestly believe that we can actually do that. No matter what our current circumstances are, or what the circumstances were that we were born into or born with, being a woman or having a menstrual cycle or whatever. And so for me, everything I do kind of spins off of that. So with the menstrual cycle awareness and the menstruality piece, it's really understanding, okay, you have a menstrual cycle, right? That's your circumstance. This is something that you have. And for many people, there are some what can appear to be real disadvantages of that and real struggles. And so for me, I'm very much focusing on, okay, but how can we use your menstrual cycle to help you get to where you want to be, right? So I don't tend to work with people very much who are just coming because they've got period pain, for example. Those people usually also want to have like the meal plans and the this and that. And I'm like, that's not me. I'm not the girl. I know I can like refer you on, but that's not me. Most of the people who come to me, they're experiencing an imbalance with their menstrual cycle somewhere. They know that something is not quite right, even if they don't know what that exactly is, but they're also usually facing something else. So the relationship is breaking down, or they're like at a point in their career where they either need to step up and, you know, go for a promotion, or leave because actually they don't want to be there, or there's the question of like, do I go traveling, do I, you know, like they're at some kind of crossroads and they don't know where they want to get to, and there's a pattern of them always coming up against this thing that they're going through. And so for me, the reason why I do this is because I'm like, you have the answers every single cycle, more or less. So, you know, this pattern of I'm finding myself here again, I've got this issue, I've got this decision to make, or I'm back in this place where I was 5 years ago or whatever, also plays out through the patterns in the menstrual cycle as well. So it's been a very interesting process to kind of really get beyond but I just love the cycle and I love this and I love the empowerment, and actually like, yeah, but what is it? Like in the end, what is it? And it's all about empowering people and guiding people to have a life that they actually enjoy living, and to use their body and their body wisdom as a tool to get there.
Oh my God, I love that. And it's so true, isn't it? It's like, I feel like within my cycle, like if I haven't addressed a problem, it comes back in my luteal phase and I'm like, oh, you're here again. And it's like kind of like in spring, summer, I can like ride through it and I'm like, okay, yeah. And then, oh no, that problem that I haven't addressed is coming up again. It's coming up again. And it might come around cycle after cycle after cycle until I address it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can't run away from it. Yeah.
I know you can't run away. So let's dive into the luteal phase and into the inner autumn, because I know that you are just a huge advocate for the luteal phase, and so many women find this a challenging part of the cycle. And you know, for me, I had to really learn to love myself and like be tender with myself through this part, because it was always the bit that I was, you know, either berating my body, feeling like that I was having a complete breakdown, or feeling like that my whole world was imploding and like what was the point of life or anything, you know what I mean? And so it's so refreshing for you that has this really I guess like uplifting, like empowering view of the luteal phase, and I'd love you to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, to say that experience is very, very real, and it is the experience of most people. So when I turn around and I say, "Oh, inner autumn's my favorite part of the cycle, and I love this premenstrual power," and people are like, "I'm sorry, what?" It's a really strange concept to get to understand, especially if your reality is that this is a place that is just hard work. For me, I look at it as this is a place that's hard work because you're being asked to deal with the things that you don't want to deal with, or the things that you're avoiding. Now, obviously, I have to just caveat this. There are some real physical symptoms that come up with the premenstrual phase. That's what PMS means, premenstrual symptoms. And I think maybe it's because I'm a writer, but I'm very particular with how we describe things. So when people say, "Oh, I'm PMSing," I mean, I use that language on social media as well because it's sometimes just shorter and easier for people to understand. But people often talk about PMS as a state of being, and it's not. It's a cluster of symptoms. So, it's the water retention, it's the sore breasts, it's the migraines, it's the whatever it is for you. So there are very real physical symptoms that shouldn't be ignored. Please go to a doctor, go to a gynecologist, like advocate for yourself. And then there are also people who have real hard times during the premenstrual phase, and they are dealing with PMDD. And although PMDD is something that you can work with through menstruality and menstrual cycle awareness, there's plenty of people out there who have done that and who are sharing that on social media. I do just want to kind of like caveat that what I'm saying might sound really kind of like light and easy, and well, that's all well and good if you don't have PMDD or you don't have physical symptoms. But the way I see it is the premenstrual phase is hard because we're being asked to confront ourselves, and we're being asked to really look at our lives and the things that are, not serving us anymore. That is just part of the cycle. And I like to describe it as, if we think about the first half of the cycle, or maybe not half, but between your bleed and your ovulation, your hormones, are rising to get you to a point where you will be fertilized and you'll become pregnant. Like that's what's happening in your body, whether you want to have children or not. So, your body is really clever, your hormones are really clever. And for most people, that part of the cycle, as you said, they can ride the wave, they kind of forget the bad stuff. These hormones are designed to make you feel good so that you go out, you're the best version of yourself, you meet a mate, you have sex, you get pregnant. Like, that's just what your body wants to happen. And we know that, like, at ovulation, our breasts might get bigger, or apparently there's studies that say that your face slightly changes to make yourself more attractive. It's like blooming, like being a rose that's blooming. And then, we have our ovulation, and there is this 2-week window where we don't know yet if we're pregnant. So if you're trying to conceive, people will know that is called the 2-week wait. Otherwise, it's called the luteal phase. And this is a time when your body doesn't quite know yet. So it's doing all the prep work. It's making the lining of your womb nice and thick and all of that. But your psyche also doesn't know what's happening. And so it's now gone from, woohoo, I'm amazing, let me go out there and meet someone, mate, now being like, okay, I might be pregnant. I might be like doing probably one of the biggest things that you can do in your life. How does my life look? What needs to change? Do I even like the person who might have impregnated me? Am I earning enough money in this job? Do I want to spend my whole life doing this job? And sometimes looking at ourselves and saying, your body is not right, your mind is not right, you are not right. So the luteal phase, everything has a purpose. And I believe that the luteal phase, the purpose here is to just bring us into real clarity with who we are, where we're at, where we're going, for big work. And that big work can either be bringing another human into the world, or bringing a project into the world, or simply being a human in the world. So that's my take on the luteal phase. Yeah.
Oh my God, amazing. And then, so how do you work with the luteal phase? Like what tools and tips do you share with the women that you work with?
Yeah, so there's the kind of standard advice that everyone will come across when they dig into menstrual cycle awareness. Really, it's self-care. Like, I have these kind of three foundations. So the first one being self-care, which is of course physical self-care, like really resting and maybe putting on a face mask and, like, you know, all that kind of stuff, but also the kind of self-care that we don't like to do. Things like looking at your finances and kind of future-proofing yourself, having those conversations, or maybe not having them in that time. That's really dependent on the individual. It's, for me, I can easily have those conversations that are a little bit difficult in my premenstrual phase, because that's when I feel very in control of my world. But if you're someone who's like really explosive, then I maybe wouldn't recommend doing that. But at least identifying, like, this is the conversation that I need to have. Maybe this is the big bit of research that I've been needing to do to find a master's program to do the, you know, the thing that I really want to do, or to start updating my CV so that I can look for a new job. So that kind of like nitty-gritty self-care. Embodiment practices, I find they're great any time of the cycle, but for me, there's something about really like getting into your body in the premenstrual phase and also in the menstrual phase. It just feels like it's a lot easier to, well, it you know, makes sense. It's a lot easier to build that connection than it is in the first part of the cycle when we're very outward facing. And then inner critic work and mindset work, which is just, yeah, it can be really challenging. But I would say that's probably the biggest part of what I do with people, because that's the biggest thing that they're bringing with them. Often it's like, I want to do this, but I keep holding myself back like this, or there's this voice that's telling me that. And, you know, like the bigness of the mind in that part of the cycle. So that's probably, like, I would say that's probably a good 50, if not 60% of the work that I do with people, is the inner critic and the mindset, and then, yeah, the embodiment and the self-care together.
Beautiful. So can you talk a bit about the inner critic and like how you work with the inner critic?
Yeah. So as I said, like, the inner critic, it has a function. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a really healthy part of our psyches that is there to keep us safe and to stop us from doing stupid things or things that we might fail at. But it can just be very loud and very unruly. And in some cases, it can also be dangerous. Like, you know, if you are someone who's dealing with PMDD, your inner critic might be planting, you know, suicidal thoughts inside of your mind. But for everyone else who's not dealing with that, like, the inner critic is not something that's there to harm you. However, the language it uses might feel extremely painful. So the way that I deal with the inner critic is really, first of all, to acknowledge that it's there. You know, like, I think a lot of us tend to either just try to run away from these thoughts and then numb ourselves with whatever your numbing thing of choice is, or that they're just actually unaware of the voices inside of their head while being aware of them. It's a really hard concept to understand, but, like, for me, one of the first times I really noticed I had an inner critic was I'd gone into a cafe here in Germany and asked them, you know, if they needed some help, because I was like, I need to find a part-time job and I also need to practice this so-called German that I'm learning. And I remember walking out of there and everything went fine. You know, I got like a trial shift and everything. And I remember walking out of there and I'd realized that I'd made a mistake in something that I'd said, just used the wrong word, right, happened. And I would say probably for about 50 meters walking down the street, I was so incredibly horrible to myself, swearing at myself, like just really abusive. And I remember just hearing it and stopping in the middle of the street and being like, what? Like, what is that? And no, like, this is not possible anymore. So a lot of us will do that, kind of like telling ourselves horrible things without really being aware of it. So first of all, becoming aware that it's there, and then paying attention to it. So it's not that you have to believe everything, but first of all, just like literally, what are the words that my inner critic is using? In the best case, writing that down or speaking it out or whatever. And then from there, you can either, well, the best thing to do is to kind of sift through it, learn to identify, actually, this isn't me. This is something that I've like heard someone saying on Instagram, or it's the voice of my mom or my year 12 teacher or whatever. The things that are just plain rubbish. Sometimes it's literally just like, you hear it back to yourself and you're like, what? No, that's ridiculous. And then finding out what's true. Like finding out what is the truth, even if it's a really hard truth, even if the language is really hard, and is very wounding, like hearing what is the truth and then working with that. Yeah, it's kind of like having that friend who's like brutally honest, except that until we start to listen to the inner critic and give it stuff to do and kind of become friends with it, it just uses extremely horrible language to get our attention.
Yeah, totally. And I think what you said is just such an important point. Like, for years, I thought that my inner critic was me. And, it's like I had this deep, deep belief, like from like primary school, that I was stupid and lazy. And so I carried this belief on and on and on and on and on until one day I just was like, actually, that's not true. And it was so huge because it was so entangled in my identity. Like, I really had no idea that this part of me was separate at all. Like, I just believed it to be true. And it's like when there's spaciousness for the inner critic to have its space, and like for us to also be who we are as well, it's such a difference. And I actually find, for me, I do a lot of talking out loud. Like, if I need to process stuff, I'll take myself on a walk and I'll be like, okay, and I'll be like, all right, babe, yeah, what do you want to say? And then my inner critic's like, and you blah blah blah, and you da da da, and all this and fucking shit and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, and I'm like, okay, anything else? And then I let her talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. I mean, thank God. I mean, people probably do walk by me in the street. I don't live in London anymore, but when I did, and then I keep going, and then I would ask, like, what do you need? Okay, like, what do you need right now? Like, what do you actually need? Like, how can I support you? And then the answers would come. But it was almost like having this outward conversation really helped me, because I was able to like have that voice and then have my other voice as well.
Yeah, it's acknowledging it, and it is a voice, right? Like it's a voice, and it's a part of us that is saying something, and it wants to be heard. And so taking the time, no matter how you do it, to actually engage with it and have a conversation. That might be journaling, it might be saying it out loud, it might be speaking it into, your voice notes or whatever. It's a way for it to be heard, and it's a way for it to get it outside of your head. So it stops things from going around on a loop all the time, same old thing, same old thing, same old thing. It gets it out of your head. It provides you space in your head, quietness, and it also helps to give you some perspective as well, because it's hard to get perspective if you're trying to deal with everything inside of your head. If you're like, okay, I've got this massive project that I need to do, for example, and I'm going to try and plan it all out in my head, like that's just not possible for most people. We have to get it outside of our head and almost see it as a separate thing to then get the perspective and say, okay, what do I need to do? How am I going to make this happen? What is it that you want from me? That kind of thing. So yeah, it's it's a beautiful way to work with it in a critic, I think, is just to acknowledge it's there. And it requires some real bravery in the beginning, and some real trust, and some real support in a lot of the cases, because sometimes it will be really hard, and it will be, you know, you're fat, you're stupid, you're an idiot, your dad doesn't love you, your best friend thinks you're this, you're that, you know, like really harsh stuff.
Totally.
A lot of it is just, it's just stuff, it's just venting. And when we actually do the work on a regular basis, then at least what I have found, some of the people that I've worked with have found, is that over time there's less of that crappy filler stuff, and it's more, you know, the things that actually need to be really dealt with in life, instead of just the, you know, like the ridiculous confrontation you had with someone and you forgot to say, or you know, you think about what you're going to say afterwards, and your mind's saying you should have said this, you should have said that. Like, that's irrelevant, right? So when you start working with it, it's just going to tell you those things less often, and just kind of get to the point more.
Yeah, beautiful. Oh, thank you. And then you mentioned PMDD, and so just for those that are listening that don't know what that means, will you just give like a little overview?
Yeah, sure. So PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it's very often described as extreme PMS. And it's really, it can be really difficult for people to understand what it is and to get a diagnosis, because we have this thing called cycle amnesia, where, you know, we bleed and then it's kind of like a lot of the premenstrual symptoms go away, and we kind of forget about it, because then we tend to feel, you know, different, if not better, for a long time, and then it's like it comes back, and it's this thing that goes on repeat. But the difference with PMDD and PMS is PMDD is something that really can disrupt your life in a really big way. So there are a set of criteria that if you were to go to your doctor or, you know, mental health specialist, they will be looking at a certain pattern or a certain number of different symptoms that arise in your premenstrual phase, and that pretty much disappear straight away with your bleed. And there's also some research to suggest that it's a genetic disposition as well for some people. So, you know, if you've got like your sister or your mother or an aunt or something like that, and they've really struggled with this part of their cycle to the point where, you know, maybe relationships have broken down, maybe there's addiction that's come about as a way to kind of like handle what's happening, and you are finding yourself also repeating those things, that can also be a sign that, you know, there's something a little bit more serious going on, or a lot more serious going on. It's one of those things that you have to track really carefully, because, as I said, there's those different criteria of different symptoms. And it's difficult because a lot of them will just sound like PMS symptoms. For most people, the real difference is those suicidal ideation thoughts. It's not necessarily that you actually want to take your own life, or that you're taking that seriously, but there's the thoughts of everything would be much better if I wasn't here, like those kinds of thoughts. And when you recognize or are able to see or have reflected back to you that that's something that's your reality in your premenstrual phase, especially if it's something that keeps coming up, then that's always a sign to go to your GP or to a mental health specialist. But yeah, it's essentially known as a much heavier form of PMS.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, okay, so are you going to take us through a practice that we can do in our luteal phase?
Yes, yeah, with pleasure. Yeah, so this is a kind of like a meditative practice just to see what's happening for you in your body, mind, heart, soul. And this is something that you can do in literally like a few minutes, or you can, really extend it as long as you need. But really, this practice is just designed to kind of bring you into what's happening, maybe also to already feel into what your inner critic is asking for you. And you can do this at any time of your cycle as well. So if you're listening and listening, and you're not in your premenstrual phase, you don't have to wait. It's just something that might help you to come a little bit deeper when you do it into your premenstrual phase. So yeah, okay. All right, so find any position that feels good for you. You can sit, you can lie, you can stand. And if it feels good and safe for you to close your eyes, then I invite you to do so. And then I'm going to invite you to take 3 breaths that can be as long or as short or as deep or as shallow as you need. And once you've taken those 3 breaths, just letting your breath settle into a rhythm, a flow that feels good for you right now. And just bringing to your mind where you're at in your cycle. That might be the day, it might be the phase. And just letting yourself be where you are. And becoming aware of the parts of you that are being held and supported by the floor or a chair, sofa or a bed. And just letting yourself sink, maybe just by 1%. Letting yourself give to the support that's being offered. So this practice is going to lead you to connect with a few different parts of yourself. There are no right or wrong answers. And really trust that the first thing that comes to your awareness, your mind, is what's true. So bringing your awareness to your physical body, taking a moment just to feel the different parts of your body, your head, your arms, your chest, belly, back, your legs and your feet. And just notice what's happening for you in your body right now. How does your physical body feel? You might feel lots of things going on, you might feel nothing, both of which are valid. And I'm going to invite you to see if you can find 1 or 2 words, 3 words maximum, that describe what is actually happening in your body. Could be pain, could be heaviness, could be gurgling, could be cramping, could be tingling. And once you've got those 1 to 3 words, just letting them settle. And then bringing your awareness down into your pelvis, your pelvic bowl. So feeling the pubic bone at the front, making a circle round the hip bones, round to the sacrum, to the other hip bone. Feeling your pelvic floor, front and back and sides. Really imagining this bowl, this pelvic bowl that holds your power. And as you visualize and feel into your pelvic bowl, noticing how your vulva feels, how your energy in this part of your body feels. Regardless of whether you have a womb still or not, being into that space. So just notice what is occupying this space today. Depending on where you're at in your cycle, you might feel a very strong connection to it, and you also might not. Again, there's no right or wrong. But as you breathe into this space, again, finding 1 to 3 words that describe what you're sensing in your pelvis, in your pelvic. And then just like we did before, letting those words just float off to the side where they can be retrieved later. And then we'll bring our awareness up into the heart, your heart space, your ribs, the chest, the back of the shoulders as well. And feeling into your heart, noticing how your heart feels today. And that might come to you in a physical sensation, it might be energetic, it might be color. And just reminding yourself that you can use your breath. This is a part of the body and the energetic body that can get really contracted. So if you're feeling the need to, then take a deep breath here. And again, with no judgment, simply labeling, describing what's happening in your heart space and your emotions with 1 to 3 words. Beautiful. And then, like we did before, letting those words just float off to the side where we can retrieve them later. As you bring your awareness up to your mind, the home of your inner critic. So first of all, just noticing how your mind feels. And by this, I mean noticing the clarity or not of your thoughts, the busyness or not of your mind. So noticing the quality of your mind, how your mind is behaving. Notice if it's trying to pull you in a certain direction, to think about a certain thing, or get you to think about work or remember things. And then just starting to tune into this part of you, this aspect of you, the inner critic. Noticing if your inner critic is there, might not be there today, might be sleeping, might have taken a holiday. On the other hand, it could be very loud. So just hear what it's saying. If you like, you can reply with a thank you or an okay, I've heard you. We're not taking it to heart, just observing. Remember, you can always ground down through your breath if you need to. Good. Now that you've started to listen to your inner critic, asking your inner critic, so we're being very active, I'm going to ask the inner critic, what is it that you need me to know right now? And again, you can respond with a thank you or an okay, I've heard you. And then we're just going to let that nugget from the inner critic float to the side where we can retrieve it later. And then bringing your awareness finally to the space around you, your energetic body. That might be an aura, it might be the feeling of the room that you're in, it might be your connection to the universe, whatever works for you. And just noticing the strength of your connection. Are you very aware of it? Are you not aware of it? And for the last time, seeing if you can find 1 to 3 words that describe the feeling of that energy around you. And if you feel nothing, that's okay. And just like we did before, letting those words float off to the side. And then just taking around 3 breaths. Again, they can be as long or short, deep or shallow, quiet or loud as you need. Let each of those breaths bring you back into your physical space, into your physical body. I'm just going to invite you to take a neck roll, 1 in each direction. Take a shoulder roll forwards and backwards. And if you can, if you've got the space, then just give yourself a stretch, reaching your arms up over your head, really feeling into your body again. And making any sound that you need. Good. And then in your own time, coming back. And I recommend just writing down those words that came to mind. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. Oh, I feel amazing. It's so good to connect in with those different parts of ourselves and get the messages from, yeah, these different energy centers that are speaking all the time.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite practices, and as I said, you can really adapt it to where you are in your cycle or how much time you have or whatever. So yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much, Natalie. It's been so good to talk to you today. Thank you for your time.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It was a real pleasure.